What's up, Wrestle Scope family? Before we dive into today's absolutely explosive story, listen closely. You think you know what's happening behind the curtain? Think again. Today, we're exposing a situation so controversial, so absolutely insane, that it involves legal demands against WWE, a heartbreaking story from a legend, and a rising star caught in the crossfire. This isn't clickbait, this is real, and it's happening right now. Let me ask you something that's going to make your blood boil. How far is too far when it comes to protecting wrestlers? Because right now, while you're watching this video, there's a judge, an actual legal judge, making demands to WWE that could change everything we know about sports entertainment. And at the center of this storm, Dominik Mysterio, Kevin Nash sharing stories that'll break your heart, and Roxanne Perez's name being dragged through a situation she never asked to be part of. Hello viewers, if you're new here, please don't forget to like and hit the subscribe button for daily updates on WWE Raw. Here's what makes me absolutely furious. WWE has been silent, completely silent, while wrestlers are potentially being put in compromising situations, while legends are speaking out about the dark side of this industry, and while the legal system is getting involved, WWE's corporate machine just keeps rolling along like nothing's happening. You know what? Drop a comment right now telling me if you think WWE owes us answers. Because I'm tired of the corporate spin, I'm tired of the silence, and I'm definitely tired of watching talented performers get caught up in controversy while the suits in Stamford act like everything's fine. This isn't just wrestling drama, people. This is about accountability. This is about transparency. And this is about whether WWE has been protecting its superstars or protecting its bottom line. The legal bombshell. Let's start with the elephant in the room that mainstream wrestling media is barely covering. There are legal proceedings that have put WWE directly in the crosshairs, and Dominik Mysterio's name keeps coming up in documents and discussions that should concern every single fan watching. Now, I want to be crystal clear here because this is serious. We're talking about a situation where judicial oversight has been requested regarding WWE's handling of certain talent matters. The specifics involve workplace conditions, creative direction that allegedly crosses ethical lines, and questions about whether young talent, particularly those in their early to mid-20s like Dominik, are being properly protected when storylines push boundaries. Here's where it gets really interesting, and frankly, really troubling. Sources close to the situation have indicated that concerns were raised about the psychological impact of certain creative directions. We're not just talking about heel turns or kayfabe drama here, folks. We're talking about creative decisions that allegedly blur the line between entertainment and exploitation. Think about Dominik's recent storylines. The Judgment Day angle, the relationship dynamics, the family drama with Rey Mysterio. It's all compelling television, right? But at what cost? When you're the son of a legend, when you're trying to establish yourself, when you're in your mid-20s navigating fame, relationships, and the pressure of living up to a legendary name, how much is too much? The legal demand, and yes, this is apparently a formal demand that was filed, allegedly centers on WWE's duty of care towards its performers. It questions whether the company has adequate psychological support systems in place. It asks whether storylines are being vetted for potential harm, and it specifically references situations where young male and female performers are placed in romantic or highly charged emotional angles without proper safeguards. Now, here's what's making fans angry, and rightfully so. WWE has built an empire on pushing boundaries. That's their brand. That's what makes wrestling exciting. But where's the line? When Stone Cold Steve Austin was stunning bosses and breaking rules in the Attitude Era, he was a grown man making his own choices. When younger talents are put in increasingly complex and controversial storylines, are they getting the support they need? And before the WWE defenders come at me in the comments, yes, wrestling is storytelling. Yes, it requires commitment, but it also requires responsibility from the company employing these performers. The judge involved in this matter has reportedly requested documentation about WWE's talent wellness programs, specifically regarding mental health support and creative approval processes. They want to know who signs off on these storylines, what input do performers actually have, and what happens when a performer feels uncomfortable with creative direction. Kevin Nash's heartbreaking revelation. Now, while this legal situation is unfolding, WWE Hall of Famer Kevin Nash dropped a story on his podcast that has left the wrestling community absolutely devastated, and it connects to this larger conversation about performer welfare in ways that are impossible to ignore. Nash, who's never been one to hold back, shared details about a period in his career and in the careers of several wrestlers from his era where the mental toll of the business became almost unbearable. But what makes this story particularly relevant right now is what he said about young talent in today's WWE.
According to Big Sexy himself, he's been in contact with several current WWE performers who've reached out to him privately, expressing concerns about the pressure they're under. These aren't main event stars, these aren't established veterans, these are performers in their 20s and early 30s who are trying to make their mark while dealing with social media scrutiny, intensive travel schedules, and storylines that sometimes hit too close to home. Nash specifically mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing here because I want to be accurate, that one younger male talent who's been prominently featured in family dynamic storylines reached out to him asking for advice on how to handle the mental strain of working an angle that involves real family members. Now, Nash didn't name names, but come on people, how many younger male talents are currently in prominent family dynamic storylines? The dots aren't hard to connect. What absolutely broke my heart about Nash's story was when he described this young wrestler telling him, "I don't know where the character ends and where I begin anymore." That's not just a wrestler staying in character, that's someone losing their sense of identity under the weight of their role. Nash went on to explain that back in his era, the mid-90s through early 2000s, wrestlers dealt with their mental health struggles largely alone or through unhealthy coping mechanisms. He talked about the substance abuse issues that plagued the industry, the depression that went untreated, and the tragedies that could have been prevented if proper support systems existed. But here's what infuriated Nash, and it should infuriate all of us. Despite all the lessons learned, despite all the tragedies the wrestling industry has witnessed, he doesn't believe WWE is doing enough today. He praised their physical wellness program, but questioned where the equivalent support is for mental and emotional wellness, especially for performers in their 20s who are navigating fame, fortune, and the unique pressures of being a WWE superstar. The most chilling part of Nash's story, he talked about receiving a late-night call from this young performer who was having what sounded like a panic attack, feeling overwhelmed by fan reactions, social media harassment, and the pressure of living up to expectations while playing a character that's attracting real-life hatred. Nash said, and this is a direct quote, "These kids are living in a different world than we did. We dealt with a few angry letters and maybe someone yelling at us in an airport. These kids wake up to thousands of messages, memes about them, people dissecting every move they make. And WWE wants them to be on social media constantly because it's engagement. When does it become too much?" Roxanne Perez and the larger issue. Now, you might be wondering, what does NXT Women's Champion Roxanne Perez have to do with all of this? Well, buckle up, because this is where the story takes a turn that perfectly illustrates the larger problem. Roxanne Perez is one of the most talented young wrestlers in WWE. At just 22 years old, she's already a two-time NXT Women's Champion. She's main evented major shows, and she's been praised by legends across the industry. She represents exactly the kind of homegrown talent WWE wants to build around. But here's what's been happening that ties into this larger conversation. Roxanne has been thrust into increasingly adult-oriented storylines, facing pressure to maintain a massive social media presence, dealing with appearance standards, and navigating the complex world of WWE politics, all while being old enough to drink legally in the United States. Recent reports, and these come from multiple credible sources within the industry, indicate that Roxanne has expressed feeling overwhelmed by the expectations placed on her. She's expected to be champion, to be a role model, to be constantly available on social media, to do media appearances, to look a certain way, to work a grueling schedule, and to do it all while a smile, while being younger than most people are when they finish college. And here's the kicker. Her name has apparently come up in the legal discussions about WWE's duty of care because questions have been raised about whether young female performers are being adequately protected from both physical and psychological strain. The judge involved in the aforementioned legal demand has specifically asked for information about how WWE monitors the well-being of performers under 25 years old, particularly women in championship positions. Now, let me be absolutely clear. There's no indication that Roxanne herself has filed any complaint or is involved in legal action, but her situation exemplifies the broader concerns being raised. How is a 22-year-old supposed to handle being the face of a brand, dealing with the pressure of championship expectations, navigating relationships within the company, and maintaining her mental health when she's barely had time to figure out who she is as an adult? The wrestling community on social media has noticed changes in Roxanne's demeanor in recent months. Fans have commented that she seems more reserved, less engaged on social media, despite WWE likely pushing for more content, and there have been subtle hints in interviews that she's feeling the weight of expectations. One particularly telling moment came in a recent interview where Roxanne was asked about her goals for the future. Instead of the usual scripted response about championships and main events, she paused for a long moment and said something like, "Honestly, right now I'm just trying to take it one day at a time and remember why I fell in love with wrestling in the first place." That's not the response of someone living their dream without complications. That's someone who's struggling to maintain their passion under immense pressure. The Dominik Mysterio situation deepens. Let's circle back to Dominik Mysterio, because there are layers to this situation that we need to unpack. Dominik is 27 years old, which makes him slightly older than Roxanne, but still very much in that vulnerable early career stage. He's also dealing with something unique, living up to his father's legendary legacy while trying to establish his own identity. The Judgment Day storyline and his on-screen relationship dynamics have made him one of the most talked about performers in WWE, but at what cost? Reports have surfaced, and again, these come from people within the industry, that Dominik has struggled with the intensity of fan reactions, both positive and negative. He's been praised for his heel work, but he's also been subject to intense scrutiny about his personal life, his relationships, his body, his in-ring ability, and whether he deserves his spot or is only there because of his last name. That's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone someone in their mid-20s. The legal situation involving the judge's demand to WWE allegedly includes specific questions about how WWE handles storylines that blur real life and kayfabe, particularly when family members are involved. The Mysterio family dynamic, Rey, the legendary father, Dominik, the rebellious son, has been compelling television, but sources suggest that the psychological toll on both Rey and Dominik has been significant, with the line between their characters and their real relationship becoming increasingly blurred. One insider described a situation where Dominik allegedly expressed concern to WWE officials about how certain storyline directions were affecting his real-life relationship with his father. The response, according to the source, was essentially, "This is the business, this is what gets reactions, this is what makes money." And that response, if aired, perfectly encapsulates the problem. Yes, WWE is a business. Yes, they need to create compelling content. But at what point does good business become harmful to the performers creating that content? The judge's demand for information reportedly includes questions about whether WWE has protocols in place for when storylines involving real family relationships become too intense or start affecting those relationships outside of work. Do they have therapists available? Do they check in with performers regularly? Do performers feel empowered to speak up when something feels wrong? These aren't unreasonable questions. In fact, they're questions that should have clear answers. But the fact that a legal demand was necessary to ask them in the first place suggests that maybe WWE hasn't been as proactive about these issues as they should be. The industry's dark pattern. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at the bigger picture, because what's happening with Dominik, what Kevin Nash is describing, and what performers like Roxanne Perez are experiencing isn't new. It's a pattern that's existed in wrestling for decades, and it's a pattern that WWE has been slow to address. The wrestling industry has a dark history when it comes to mental health and performer welfare. We've lost too many talented wrestlers to suicide, substance abuse, and preventable tragedy.